listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me, as always, it's Zeeshan.
Yo.
All right, man. So the NBA playoffs, they are finally over. We have now crowned a champion. Congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks, the 2021 NBA champions. Who would have thought, to be honest with you, besides Bucks fans? But yeah, we had the finals, and Milwaukee ended up winning the series in 6 games.
Yeah, first of all, again, we haven't been around for a bit. We know that, life gets busy, but also our previous episode had some issues, so we kind of have to, deal with that. And, we're on this episode, so, that's just a little bit of an update for you guys as to why we haven't put out an episode in a bit of time. But hopefully from here on out, we keep pumping out the episodes every week as we normally do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we ran into a couple of technical issues in last week's episode that we recorded. So we decided rather than, putting out a bad quality episode, we'll just re-record a newer episode. And I think a more current idea, more current things that you guys want to hear about.
Yeah.
Which, again, nothing's more current right now than the NBA champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, Giannis Antetokounmpo was able to win Finals MVP. There was no doubt in anybody's mind that if the Bucks won the title, Giannis was going to be the Finals MVP. This man put up 50 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks in Game 6.
Not to mention the fact they shot 17 of 19 from the free throw line.
Yep.
That is very impressive. And also the fact that they came back down 0-2. They won 4 straight. They did what the Raptors did to them 2 years ago, right? Yeah. But listen, man, that takes a level of, mental fortitude and mental toughness to be down 0-2 and still come back and, win 4 straight. And especially in the fashion that they did, winning in Phoenix in Game 5 the way
that was
they did,
huge.
That was very impressive.
The block by Giannis and to save themselves, I think, in Game 3. Then the alley-oop and the steal by Jrue Holiday in Game 4. It's in Game 5. Just moments like that down the stretch, the Bucks really showed why they were the better team, why they were the more veteran-savvy team, the more experienced team. And, on top of all that, Giannis just playing insane. All of that just culminated into the Bucks winning their first championship since 1971, which is crazy to say out loud.
First in 50 years, man.
First in 50 years, man.
Shout out to the Milwaukee Bucks. They played a hell of a series. They did. I got to give credit to also Mike Budenholzer because, we've talked a lot of smack about Mike Budenholzer and in fairness to us, so has everyone else.
We got to call him a championship coach now.
He is a championship coach. No, listen, man. With all due respect, Mike Budenholzer deserves it. But every adjustment that the fans and that he needed to make this playoffs, he made it, right? Whether it was not going towards running his drop coverage sometimes running, a slight drop coverage, switching him more, running Giannis in the pick and roll more, putting Giannis in the dunker spot more, moving him away from the top of the key more. He did every single adjustment. He made every single adjustment that the fans and that other people wanted him to make, playing guys more minutes, shortening the rotations. So, in fairness to Mike Budenholzer, we've talked a lot of smack about him in the past, but similar to what I did last year at Frank Vogel and the job that he did in the finals and in the playoffs last year, I'll give my respect to Mike Budenholzer this year because he coached a hell of a playoff run.
Yeah, he definitely made the right adjustments, and he definitely did the things that we were always critical of him in the past, like not adjusting, not playing his guys in the right moments, not putting them in the right positions to succeed. He did those things, and that really helped the Bucks in coming back from an 0-2 deficit in the finals. But I do want to, talk about the Phoenix Suns for a little bit. They had a very good playoff run, man. They were the story of the playoffs, in my opinion, at least. They played their butts off, and their young talent just showed out and played very well under Chris Paul's leadership. But ultimately, this is a young team, and it really showed down the stretch. The pressure really got to them, being up 2-0 and trying to close, and they blew some key plays down the stretch. Obviously Ayton getting blocked on an alley-oop, that shouldn't necessarily happen. Devin Booker, instead of making the easy pass to DeAndre Ayton in the paint, decided to keep it, then gets stripped and lets the Bucks get a key alley-oop play to win Game 5. Just miss shots. Mikal Bridges missing dunks late in games. Like, just a lot of these little mistakes that, are understandable for a young team. But again, if you're a team that's in the NBA Finals, these are plays that ultimately cost you a championship. And
yeah, man, as you advance in the playoffs, the margin of error gets smaller and smaller, right?
Yeah.
One tiny mistake, one guy out of position on a pick and roll, for example, will cost you a series.
Yeah.
But despite that fact, we want to give our props to the Phoenix Suns as well, like you said. They played a hell of a playoff run, man. The credit to them. We'll talk about them a bit later.
Shout out Monty Williams, though.
Shout out Monty Williams, for real, man. Like, this guy's been through a lot, but he's definitely... There's a reason why he's known as one of the best locker room guys in the league. Right?
Dude, like, just even hearing some of his, like, when he was mic'd up on the sidelines, just hearing him, coach up some of his guys, man. Inspirational stuff, man. Like, it's really, really cool to see, man. And finally, the one last thing I do want to mention about the NBA Finals was this was a very entertaining finals to watch. Like, I think the last finals, at least for us, that was pretty entertaining. Was the 2019 Raptors and Golden State Finals. But ultimately, this really had a very competitive, very back and forth. Like, all the games were close. All the games were nail biters. Like, there were micro adjustments being made. We had superstar performances. Like, it was a very, very entertaining NBA Finals, man. Obviously...
It was a very evenly matched, I think, NBA Finals. It was two teams that were feel-good teams.
And they were fresh.
Exactly.
Like, fresh teams coming in there.
New teams. Yeah. Teams that had been overlooked in terms of, their market, per se. Teams headlined by players who had stuck it out during the bad times with their team.
Yeah.
It was just a very good story for the NBA this year, especially coming off of the year that they had. It just wasn't a great overall year for the NBA, I think.
Yeah.
And to have a finish like this in the NBA Finals was a big win for the NBA.
It was great, man, especially with Giannis winning the way he did, staying in Milwaukee, taking, staying in the smaller market. And again, we've obviously had some frustration with him not coming to Toronto, but at the end of the day, he won the championship here. He did what he set out to do, and that's something that nobody will be able to take away from him. So it was just a feel-good story, honestly, that that the way this year ended in what was honestly a very, very forgettable year, just in terms of the world itself. That was kind of a recap of the NBA Finals and kind of the playoffs as a whole. But we did want to actually use this episode to kind of talk about 5 things that we learned from this playoffs. And there was a lot of things that this playoffs actually taught us. A lot of things that we really took for granted, things that we never really considered beforehand. There was a lot of new stuff happening in these playoffs, man. First and foremost, the first thing we learned is everybody's bracket got messed up in this one. Like, so pretty much if you see those bracket challenges, always look at the odds, because dude, it is impossible to predict these things. We do a season prediction of records, and we're never right. Like, we're right on a few things, but you cannot predict an NBA season, let alone an NBA playoff.
Exactly, bro. We do it, check out those episodes if you guys have. I think those are the most fun episodes for us, because it lets us see how wrong we are each and every single season. But like you were saying, those are for the season, right? It's a different story for the playoffs.
Yeah.
Usually, especially when it comes to the NBA, maybe football, different story. But in the NBA, especially, usually people know what the outcome's going to be for the most part, right? Or can predict, kind of guess what it is. This year, everyone's brackets just got messed up. Nobody knew what the outcome was. I think the first thing we have to start off with is the supposed contenders that everyone had winning the championship, right? Everyone had either one of 3 teams for the most part, I will say. The Lakers, the Clippers, or the Nets pretty much winning it all, or at least making it to the finals. The Lakers/Clippers versus the Brooklyn Nets in the finals. Now, the Lakers and Nets, actually, and also the Clippers, they had some issues that we'll get into in our next point. But the point is, those 3 teams all exited earlier than people expected. The Clippers maybe not as much, but the Lakers...
I mean, they were close a couple of times being knocked down at the first and second round. So,
yeah.
do we really know how good the Clippers were actually going to be? And then Brooklyn ultimately being disappointing because, again, we'll talk about in the next point, but, at the end of the day, that team was built to go to the NBA Finals, and they didn't, which is kind of funny in the grand scheme of things when you think about it. But yeah, who would have thought Phoenix would have made it to the NBA Finals? Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw Atlanta making it to the conference finals. Like, listen, I was happy Atlanta beat, the New York Knicks in the first round, which feels like an eternity ago. But, I was really upset at the Philadelphia 76ers not being able to put away Atlanta. But they made it to the conference finals. Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, I think that is probably the story of the playoffs, I would say. That's probably the biggest point of emphasis in these playoffs. Atlanta. Even I had them... You had them...
making the second round.
Yeah. I had them losing the first round, actually, in 7 games. You had them beating the Knicks in the first round in 7 games. But when Atlanta was facing Philadelphia before the series, we both said...
Bro, we thought it was
it's
right
over.
off.
It's over. 5-game series, right? But... you have to give credit to the Atlanta Hawks, man. They were definitely the biggest underdog in these playoffs, and they made it way farther than anybody expected. They took out the Knicks, which that team had a lot of hype going for them, and then they took out the Philadelphia 76ers. And then they played a very good series against the eventual champions in Milwaukee Bucks.
And who would have thought that? The Bucks would have won the NBA champion.
Exactly.
Honestly speaking, if anybody predicted this season... You are honestly the biggest liar in the world, or you have some sort of crystal ball of some kind, because I don't think anybody could have been able to see this coming, man. With everything that happened, everything that transpired, man.
Yeah, and exactly. And speaking of one of the biggest reasons why I think nobody saw this type of playoffs coming is injuries. Yeah, that's probably the overall biggest factor in these playoffs. Injuries definitely affected this year's playoffs. This season was plagued with injuries and also COVID protocols. And, these issues, especially the shortened season and the condensed season, not shortened, but, it was technically a shortened season, but it was a very, very condensed season. We had talked about this earlier in the year where executive had even said that I think this was the worst season schedule-wise that he'd seen in around 35 years or something like that. So all of these factors definitely played a huge role in these playoffs. When we're talking about the injuries that the teams faced, especially the big contenders. So when we talk about the Lakers, LeBron and AD both being injured. LeBron, doesn't matter what you say, even if you say, oh, he was looking older. The fact remains that before he got injured, he was an MVP candidate. Yeah. Now, yes, he's not the same player he once was, but he was still an MVP
candidate.
He
wasn't driving to the rim. If there's one thing about LeBron, he's going to attack the rim.
Especially in the playoffs. Maybe not in the regular season anymore.
Yeah.
He'll chill in the regular season, but you saw what happened last year's playoffs. This guy literally bulldozed his way to the rim, whoever was there. And he could not even get to the rim. He shot the most threes ever in a series. He barely attacked the rim.
He just didn't look like LeBron. At least, especially from people like us who've seen LeBron a lot throughout his career, throughout his playoff series. This year, he just never looked like LeBron. And
these playoffs.
At least in these playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of that has to be attributed to the injuries. And then again, AD wasn't right either. When is he right? But that's a whole other conversation with Anthony Davis. But the fact of the matter is, if the Lakers were healthy, if these two guys were healthy, would the Phoenix Suns have beat them? Again, who would have really known? But it would have, definitely LeBron wouldn't allow his team to lose in 6 games.
Yeah. Flipping things over to the Eastern Conference contenders, James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving was plagued by injuries throughout the season. He actually had, I think, his healthiest season in a couple of years, which is saying a lot.
He had a good year, All-NBA third team year.
Yeah, exactly. But the one we didn't see coming was James Harden because he's been an Iron Man throughout his whole career. And this year, he was just completely plagued by injuries. He tried giving it a go with the next season on the line against Milwaukee, but we all saw how he played. That was not James Harden out there, right?
He was in for 5 minutes, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm out."
In the first game.
Yeah.
So Kyrie and James Harden being injured definitely did not help the Brooklyn Nets. We talked about the Philadelphia 76ers, Joel Embiid playing with the torn MCL. Again, the Sixers' problem was not Joel Embiid, but it didn't add to, the solutions. His health or his lack of healthy playing time did not add to the good things for the Philadelphia 76ers. So it didn't help them in that regard.
Yeah.
Talking about, for example, a couple more names. Kawhi Leonard. He was missing for the Clippers after the Dallas series, or from the Dallas series onwards, he was not playing for the Clippers. So
Well, he got hurt in the Utah series. So he got hurt in the Utah series when he was playing in the second round.
Yeah.
And then, ultimately he just wasn't able to play a majority of the series against the Suns.
And listen, man, shout out to the Clippers for the way they played without him. But again, with Kawhi Leonard there,
that's Kawhi Leonard.
Exactly. You're talking about a completely different story. Yeah. Trae Young being banged up in the playoffs, missing a couple of games. And then also Jamal Murray. There was a lot of expectations for the Denver Nuggets, and we talked about this previously. There was a lot of expectations for the Denver Nuggets, and unfortunately, those expectations all got popped when Jamal Murray, tore his ACL.
And Jokic did his best to carry the team, and obviously they didn't make it past the first round, which was pretty impressive. But again, nobody without Jamal Murray and with the amount of injuries Denver had, nobody really saw them going anywhere past that, despite how great Jokic was.
Yeah. So the point is, these injuries, no doubt, played a huge role in this year's playoffs. Having said that, the issue is when people try to bring up an asterisk, let's say, about these playoffs or about these champions or about previous champions. The fact remains that basketball is a contact sport, and any sport will have injuries. It's just part of the game. It's a natural process. It's something that will happen every single year, unfortunately. And that's my main point about these playoffs. You can't say there's an asterisk on this year's playoffs because injuries are part of the game. It's a yearly occurrence. It's a natural occurrence. Every championship year had injuries. We want to go back to last year in 2020. First of all, COVID, right? Again, that's not really a yearly occurrence. Hopefully not, at least. But injuries did play a part as well as COVID.
Then a 4-month layoff between this 4-month break in between the season.
Exactly. Gordon Hayward, Russell Westbrook, Ben Simmons, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. All of them had injuries in last year's playoffs. Kevin Durant, Kyrie didn't even play in last year's playoffs. The previous season, this one really irks me as a Raptors fan, right? Because we've been hearing this since we've won the championship. Oh no, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson were injured. Well, guess what? That's part of the game.
And Klay played majority of the series. He got hurt and obviously he got hurt in probably the worst way possible. But at the end of the day, he still was there for that series. So if you're saying discrediting the Raptors, they did beat a Golden State team with the core three that won 73-9.
Exactly.
Obviously, KD was unfortunate. He tried to come back, came back, was looking decent, and then obviously snapped his Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
Again, these things happen, but it can't be on the Raptors for doing that. They did what they had to do. They
exactly.
shut down Oracle Arena.
Yeah.
Still remember that.
They shut down Oracle Arena, right? Great. So, every single year has injuries. You can't use this as an asterisk or as an excuse to, downplay a champion or downplay any team in the playoffs. Like we always say this when we talk about these so-called asterisks, right? All championship titles aren't made the same. They're not all on the same level, right? You can't say the Golden State's 2017 championship is the same level as this year's Milwaukee Bucks championship. That's not the case. But there are no asterisks, right? Championships are created differently, but there's no such thing as an asterisk on a championship. You can't discredit Golden State's 2017 and 2018 championships. You can say they don't have as much value as any other championship, but you can't discredit it because there's a lot of effort and work and luck, right, that goes into those championships. So saying these championships have asterisks, I think, is a really big discredit to these NBA players, to these staffs, to these organizations who work this hard to reach the top. And not to mention, it makes you look like a casual, in all honesty.
Ultimately, Giannis said it best after he won his championship this year. Nobody can take this away. And he's right. No, he's a champion. Nobody can take this away from him. And that's the reality of it is. Unless you're the Houston Astros and do something that's so egregious that people are literally calling to take away your championship, you can't take a championship away from a team. No matter what you say or do, they got that ring. They earned it. They did what they have to do. and they are champions.
Yeah.
Which brings us into our next point on what we learned from these playoffs. The Philadelphia 76ers process is officially over.
Over.
It is
Gonzo.
over. It's over. Sam Hinkie tried a thing. He tried to tank, intentionally lose year after year, try to get high draft picks, which, by the way, weren't even great picks. Like, you're talking about like two out of like maybe the 7 that they probably accumulated.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about guys like MCWs. We're talking about like Markelle Fultz. Again, I still have faith in Markelle Fultz. Nerlens Noel, Jahlil Okafor. Like,
oh man,
they have a lot of misses in the process. But after this postseason, after witnessing how Ben Simmons performed in these playoffs, and what I have been saying for like at least a couple of years now, they got to break up this core. They have to break up Simmons and Embiid, and the Sixers finally realized that we got to trade this guy. You know, when the guy isn't even attempting to shoot. Like, again, Giannis was missing countless number of free throws. He was still taking them. People were literally counting the 10 for Giannis while he was at the free throw line, which was hella disrespectful in my opinion. I did love it though.
I did love it, but like, bro, seriously, in all honesty, the NBA's got to address that, man.
They do have
the
to.
The NBA already has, side note, before you continue, the NBA already has a time issue in terms of their games going for way too long. Those Giannis free throws and other players like Dwight Howard and whatnot who do that do not help the NBA's ratings. Let's just get that with it.
Yeah. So obviously, like, again, that at least Giannis attempts free throws. He took a 3-pointer. He made a 3-pointer. Like, these just attempting a shot, showcasing growth in some level is what we haven't seen from Ben Simmons since he got into the league. And honestly speaking, he has a lot of tools. He has a lot of raw potential, but he just doesn't fit for the Sixers and what they're trying to do right now. There's been too many playoff embarrassments, and these two have never been a good fit to begin with. You know, obviously the Sixers need a more traditional point guard. They need shooting around Embiid. Obviously they need to keep Embiid healthy, but you know, these two guys together, that experiment I think is over. It should be over. It should have been over last season in my opinion, but the Sixers finally realized that it's time to move Ben Simmons.
Well, hopefully they did realize that.
Hopefully. I mean, he is on the market in terms of Daryl Morey's taking calls for Ben Simmons. Now, will he be traded? That's yet to be seen. But here's the problem with trading Ben Simmons is finding a suitor to take on what is now a rebuilding project of Ben Simmons. Because not only do you have to fix Ben Simmons' inability or his confidence in when it comes to his shooting, you have to also fix his image with the basketball world. Everybody saw him miss not even attempt that layup. Everyone saw him disappear in the series with the Hawks, and it's inexcusable. Any real basketball fan will look at that and be like, "Yo, this is that's horrible." Like, you have to at least attempt the shot. You know, if you miss it, fine, we can live with it, but you didn't even attempt it. Like, that's unforgivable.
Yeah, man, definitely it's not a great look for the 76ers. It's definitely not a good look for Ben Simmons. But in terms of speaking about the process as a whole, I think our main takeaway, especially, I think any organization and any fan should be taking this away as well. Don't bank on young talent to save you, and don't tank. Tanking, you can search this up statistically and historically as well. Tanking often does not actually work.
It does not.
The best thing you can do as a team if you don't have the requisite star talent to win a championship is retool, which is why we like saying we prefer it when teams retool rather than completely rebuild.
Like, tear things apart.
Yeah, exactly. Put a competent team around and get it going. Now, again,
you never know.
People are always going to say, oh, you don't want to be in the dreaded middle of the pack. Well, here's the thing about having at least a competent team. It builds a culture. When you bring young players in, when you already have an established culture, they're able to adapt better. They're able to, grow better. They're able to bank on their potential more. Which is why you have teams like, for example, the Raptors and the Spurs, who continuously plug guys into their system who other teams would have never thought would have panned out as great NBA players, but they always do. Why? Because those cultures are established. Those organizations are established.
Well, I mean, again, I would like think good thing about the Raptors, because again, it's not even about try doing what the Phoenix Suns were doing. Like, yes, they were accumulating talent. They were building, fostering that culture with Monty Williams. Then what do? They get a guy they get a free agent acquisition in Chris Paul, or trade in Chris Paul. And look at that. They ended up in the NBA Finals. You never know what's going to happen. But they had the pieces.
Kawhi Leonard situation.
The Kawhi Leonard situation. The Raptors were right on the cusp of breaking through. They took a risk. They made a move. They got Kawhi Leonard. And look at that. They won a championship. You never know what's going to happen. The Milwaukee Bucks, constantly, they were losing in the conference finals, losing in the semifinals. Went out, they got Drew Holiday. They brought in a couple of pieces, plugged them into their system, and now they won a championship. So you never know what's going to happen. So just banking on the draft, banking on the lottery is kind of a foolish strategy.
Not to mention, like you said, it's a lottery. It's literally called a lottery for a reason. Because you don't know how any young player is going to play. You literally do not know.
Like, they're magic beans. To be honest with you, like, they are magic beans. You have no idea what they're going to turn into.
Exactly.
And one last point about Ben Simmons I do want to mention. I did mention, like, finding a suitor for trading for him. Obviously taking on that rebuilding project. But also a team that's willing to take on an enormous contract. And I think, spoiler, we are going to be doing a What's Next episode on the Philadelphia 76ers, so definitely stay tuned for that one, where we'll go in more detail on what we think the Sixers should do. But finding a team to really take on this player is very difficult right now. I don't know how Daryl Morey will do it, but the reality, the whole picture, the process is over. The Sixers have to go into another direction, and that direction is getting the pieces in place to win a championship. They have to. They have too much talent to waste. They have too good of a roster to waste this much potential in right now.
Yeah, I think you said it best pretty much.
Yeah.
Our fourth point is, if these playoffs have taught us anything, especially I think with one player in particular, is to not count out the veteran stars. A lot of the times we say, this guy's career is over, they've hit their peak, they're past their prime, whatnot. And I think Chris Paul is a great example of that. When we go back 2 years ago to the end of his Houston Rockets tenure, the debate was, will Chris Paul ever be the same? Is his career over? Yada, yada, yada. And Chris Paul in the last 2 years has proven that his career is not over and he is still Chris Paul. He led this young and inexperienced team to the NBA Finals. And he did this as well with the OKC Thunder, leading them to the playoffs. The Oklahoma City Thunder last year had no business being in the playoffs. Nobody thought they were going to be a playoff team. Everyone thought they would be a bottom 3 team.
So did we.
Including us. Yeah, exactly. Including us. And Chris Paul led them to the NBA playoffs. Now, this year, he goes to the Phoenix Suns, a team that was a 30-win team last year. Now, again, they did go on an 8-0 run to end off the season. But he came to this team and completely transformed them to the point that they became a championship contender. They finished as the 2nd seed in the Western Conference this year, and they got to the NBA Finals. This just shows you the level of, the value a veteran player can bring. Not just a superstar player, but even a role player veteran. We've seen in the NBA Finals how valuable guys like PJ Tucker were. PJ Tucker was scoring 0 points at times, but that's not his value, where his value comes from. The on-court production was there from PJ Tucker, a guy like Bobby Portis, who's been pretty much, dumped from place to place during his career after Chicago.
Shout out PJ Tucker, though. This man beat every single one of his old Rockets teammates to win a ring before all of us. That is impressive, and honestly, man, but funny thing about PJ, you were on the Raptors, but you chose to leave the Raptors to go to the Rockets because you thought you could win a ring with the Rockets, yet the Raptors won a ring before you. Just saying, if you would have just stayed, PJ might not be in this situation. But Congrats to PJ Tucker, won a ring. Good for him.
Yeah, listen, man, like I said, PJ Tucker, those guys show their value, right? Another guy I can bring up in these NBA Finals, Brook Lopez. I think Brook Lopez is one of the epitomes of how to transform your game late in your career. After this guy's Lakers tenure, and, this will be a deep cut for a lot of people because, I don't even know if half the people remember that he was on the Lakers at this point. But after his Lakers tenure was over, everyone was saying, this guy's career is done because he was the example that, he was a prototypical example of a bygone era. A player who posts up, a big center who posts up, who's not quick, who's not a great athlete, who can't play defense in the modern day and age, and can't shoot, or rather wouldn't shoot threes. And, everyone thought his career was done as well after his Lakers tenure. But he went to the Milwaukee Bucks and completely transformed himself. And to the point now where in these playoffs, he was amazing, I think. Like, I have to say. And this is coming from a guy that's been critical of Brook Lopez at times.
I mean, Game 6 of the NBA Finals was the biggest, I think, crowning moment for Brook Lopez was that the Bucks needed somebody to step up because Middleton was having a rough game. Holiday was having a rough game. Giannis was the only one doing anything for the Bucks in that game. And they just needed one more guy to step up. And who was that guy?
Bobby Portis. But Brook Lopez in the third quarter.
Yeah, they did have Bobby Portis as well. But Brook Lopez really turned it up in the third quarter. It really helped them, solidify their run. He was making the right plays, just hitting floaters, getting rebounds, being a presence on the defensive end, getting monster dunks. Which is, he's just
getting blocks,
doing the little things that
he became an all defensive player in Milwaukee, which is crazy. If you told this to someone 6 years ago that Brook Lopez would be an all defensive player in the modern era, that's crazy to think about. But shout out Brook Lopez, shout out all these veteran guys. One more team that I want to talk about is the Los Angeles Clippers. Moving away from the NBA Finals, the Clippers played a great playoffs without Kawhi Leonard. And that's in large part due to guys like Marcus Morris and especially Reggie Jackson.
You couldn't do it. No, for real. Shout out Paul George. He played pretty well in this playoff.
No, I wasn't even. I was thinking of. Listen, man. I wasn't thinking of Paul George even. I was thinking of Reggie Jackson.
He played well. Reggie played well.
So what happened was I was thinking of Reggie Jackson and Bobby Shmurda popped up in my head. Those guys are twins, bro. But shout out Reggie Jackson, man. Like, this guy absolutely balled out in the NBA playoffs.
He did.
Every single time the Clippers needed a big shot, this guy hit a big shot. This guy had one of the clutchest playoff
Bro, he reshaped his three-point shot. Exactly. This guy reshaped his jumper. Like, he was hitting jumpers.
He couldn't hit a jumper when he came into the NBA.
Yeah.
Look at him now.
Now it's like, spot-up shooter right there, man. Like, it's crazy to see how Reggie was a big part of it. But again, I brought up Paul George because I think Paul George did do
he deserves a lot of credit.
He deserves some credit. He took a lot of shit, especially from us, from his performance in last year's playoffs. Obviously, shout out Way Off P and the crew, Pandemic P. I'm gonna hit the backboard P. I gotta get it all out there. But he did come in and he really showed why he's playoff P. And really stepped up when his team needed him. So,
not to mention the fact that he really carried in the sense that he played the most playoff minutes out of anybody at that time. By far he played the most playoff minutes out of anybody else in the league. So, Paul George really laid it all out there, and he played a great great playoffs. And was one of the veteran players who showed that you can't count them out for us.
Like, I think to win a championship, you need a good blend. You need young guys, but you need the veterans. You need the experience. And the Milwaukee Bucks this year really highlighted that fact for us, and also other teams in these playoff runs as well.
Yeah, and then like you said, speaking of the good blend you need of veterans and young stars. The young stars in this year's playoffs, I think more than any playoffs I've seen in a while, absolutely showed out.
Yo, the future's bright for the NBA.
The future is bright for the NBA, and this showed, I think, the next generation of stars for the NBA. Transitioning from the LeBron, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, for example. Kawhi Leonard's still a bit younger, but yeah, exactly, man. We're old. We're way past, growing up with Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant,
Ray Allen.
Yeah, man. The future is bright for the NBA moving forward, especially when you talk about the international market that the NBA has. I think the NBA is in good hands moving forward. Definitely. A lot of young stars broke out in these playoffs, starting with the finals team, for example. Giannis Antetokounmpo was absolutely amazing. But flipping things over to Phoenix Suns, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton especially were absolutely phenomenal in these playoffs. They did have a couple of, not so great games in the finals. But, for this being their first playoffs, the performances they gave was absolutely amazing, no doubt.
Especially DeAndre Ayton. I was very, honestly speaking, because he was in the same draft as Luka Doncic and stuff, he wasn't necessarily getting the publicity out of a number one pick. And the expectations this guy wasn't really that great. But, this season, things really clicked for him. He finally had a point guard in Chris Paul that can get him the ball in the right spots. And he was doing the things you want a prototypical center in today's day to do. get the ball, dunk the ball, have a bit of a mid-range fadeaway kind of game, grab rebounds, be an energy guy defensively, and that's what DeAndre Ayton did. He did a lot of that stuff. I was very impressed with the way he played in these playoffs.
Speaking of defensively, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Because when DeAndre Ayton came into the league, the biggest question about him was he can't play any defense. And the defensive performance that he gave in this year's playoffs being, I think, the X factor for the Phoenix Suns. Without DeAndre Ayton, Phoenix Suns would have not, I think, even made it past the first round, honestly.
Yeah, no,
DeAndre Ayton's defense was, I think, the biggest X factor for the Phoenix Suns and the success they had. His ability to be able to defend guys like Anthony Davis, big guys who normally are able to out-quick their opponents, DeAndre Ayton was just as quick as them. He was just as athletic as them. He was just as strong as them. And he's just as fast as them, right? So DeAndre Ayton, I think, was the biggest X factor in this year's playoffs, for the Phoenix Suns.
And Devin Booker, I was also impressed. His mid-range ability is honestly very, very impressive, man. The way he's able to maneuver, get to his spot, hit tough shots. Although again, there were moments in the finals where I'm like, listen, man, you gotta get better at being a playmaker. But in terms of just being a shot maker, a scorer, this guy can do it all, man. And I was really impressed with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton as well. Another guy, again, a guy who I've been very critical of, but definitely had a great playoff run, is Trae Young. Trae Young, honestly speaking, man, like he played well, man. Like this guy was shooting lights out. He was getting his teammates involved. He was able to kind of do what he wanted. Especially the floater game, he had that really going for him as well. And honestly, he was a big reason why Atlanta was even able to get to the conference finals. It was just based on the fact that this guy was kind of playing like a Steph Curry kind of Steve Nash type of game where, he was facilitating, he was, shooting the ball still, but he was also, being able to handle and play make and be that sort of that true number one point guard option.
Yeah, 2 points about Trae Young is, number one, the biggest thing I think that Trae Young showed, especially this being his first playoff run, whenever the Atlanta Hawks needed him, he was there. He stepped up. I think that's the biggest.
He's got confidence.
That was the biggest single, crowning moment for Trae Young, right? The fact that this was his first playoff series or first playoff run, and even if he did not play a great overall game, when you needed him in the fourth quarter, he was always there. And number two, I would say he's always being compared to Steph Curry, but I don't think that's his game. His game is very Steve Nash-esque, right? Steve Nash has even talked about if he played in the modern game, he would probably be Trae Young, right? Trae Young is much more Steve Nash than he is Steph Curry.
Nash had a lot less finesse, I would say. Like Trae Young has a lot more finesse in his game, but
I would say Steve Nash had a lot of finesse.
No. Nash was different in the sense that like
he had good fundamentals.
Yeah, his fundamentals were good.
Finesse.
Like, bro, look at his jump shot. The jump shot was perfect fundamental.
Yeah.
Like I love Steve Nash, by the way. So honestly speaking, Trae Young was someone I'm still critical. Obviously, I don't like his kind of. I don't know. I just don't like his kind of his personality or something. That's kind of a little thing with me. But no denying, he did very well in his first playoff runs, and I think he's gonna be. A very big factor in future playoffs as well.
Another guy who was very good in his first playoff run as well, and especially the lead up to that playoff run was Ja Morant. When we're talking about a guy who in his first playoff run did everything you could possibly ask from a young player, a guy who's 21 years old, whatever he is, Ja Morant was absolutely amazing. Dropping 40 points in his first playoff series. Dropping, beating the Golden State Warriors to get into the playoffs. Ja Morant played like a second overall pick. He is one of the young faces of the league, and he showed that he's going to be one of those dominating factors in the league for years to come. So he was absolutely tremendous, I think.
Dude, Ja Morant is absolutely insane, man. The fact that he went number 2 in his draft, again, like, I get it. I get why he went number 2, but, dude, he went 2 behind Zion, but, dude, what a steal of a pick for the Memphis Grizzlies, man. Like, this guy is the future. He's phenomenal, man. Like, he is such a great player, man. Like, he's basically Westbrook. He has, like, Westbrook speed, athleticism, hustle, all that mixed with, a shooting ability and a confidence that, like, we haven't seen in quite some time from a player. And, Ja Morant's fantastic. Another player, obviously, who unfortunately suffered some injuries in the playoffs is Donovan Mitchell, but Donovan Mitchell, man, like what a player, man. This guy went 14th, I think 13th overall in the NBA draft, man. Was traded actually, and since then, man, he's just been a consistent player for the Utah Jazz, man. This year in the playoffs, man, 32 points a game, 5 assists. He's been improving his playmaking abilities throughout his moments in the playoffs, and he's just evolved as a player. He's just gotten himself to a point where he's now a top-tier player in this league, man. He's a top-tier playoff performer, a clutch performer. So, shout out Donovan Mitchell, man.
And then finally, shout out Luka Doncic. Because
guy.
we have to. The guy, he's going to be the 2K athlete this year.
2K
he is definitely, in a lot of people's eyes, the next guy to dominate the league. The next up-and-coming, for example, number one.
Not bad for a European.
Exactly, man. Like, Luka Doncic was absolutely amazing once again in this year's playoffs. And I think, honestly, we can't even say that much about him because everything that we want to say is already
We've said a lot, honestly.
We've said a lot about him, but, Luka Doncic, I think the biggest statement about him is that I think most people believe he's that next number one guy.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much embodies everything about Luka Doncic.
Pretty much. So those were 5 things that we learned from these playoffs. Obviously, there were probably more things we could have learned, but these are the 5 that we really wanted to highlight. And what was pretty eventful, pretty chaotic, kind of interesting playoffs, nevertheless. Let us know what you guys think. What did you guys learn from these playoffs? Let us know either on the comment section on YouTube or on social media. Which brings us finally into the up and under segment for this week. Now, we are going to cover some news headlines that, we had last week that we weren't able, obviously with our episode not really working out too well. But we are going to cover some of them in this week's episode just to kind of give you guys some of our thoughts on them. So first off, are you up or under on some of the coaching hires that have happened throughout the NBA? Obviously, we'll just go back and forth. First off, are you up or under on the Trailblazers hiring Chauncey Billups as their new head coach?
Yeah, I'm up on it. Listen, man, he's been in talks a lot for a lot of recent head coaching positions. And the Trailblazers definitely needed to bring in something new, bring in someone with some more creativity than Terry Stotts. And I think it's a good thing. He's another point guard that Damian Lillard can connect with. Now, obviously, a lot of the, I would say, external issues that came with the Chauncey Billups hiring are frankly kind of ridiculous. But, again, I don't really pay attention to those crowds.
Strictly basketball perspective, Chauncey Billups is a very smart guy, always been a very intelligent point guard. You've heard guys like Kyle Lowry and Chris Paul really praise him for his abilities, just being that sort of a basketball savant in terms of the way he's able to play his job, X's and O's, understanding defenses, understanding how to, manipulate things on offense. So Chauncey definitely will bring a new voice, a fresh, look for the Portland Trailblazers next season.
Yeah, next up, are you up or under on the Dallas Mavericks hiring Jason Kidd as their new head coach, as well as Nike executive Nico Harrison as their GM?
I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of under. Just mainly because, again, we don't know what we're getting from Jason Kidd as their head coach. Obviously, again, has a connection with Dallas. Rick Carlisle wanted him to be his successor. He does have some similarities to Luka in terms of from being a player perspective. But in terms of Jason Kidd as a head coach, we've seen it before, and it was not great. Now, he could have learned some things, obviously winning a championship with the Lakers, being an assistant for the last few seasons. Maybe he could be different. But until we see it, I won't know, and that's why I'm kind of a little under. And then also with Nico Harrison, this guy's a Nike executive, so why is he now your general manager of a basketball team? To me, that dynamic doesn't make a ton of sense. But then again, Brad Stevens was literally brought up from a coach to a president of basketball operations.
Yeah, man. For me, Nico Harrison, I don't even know anything about the guy, so I don't know. We'll see. I'll put it pretty bluntly. I'm under on Jason Kidd being hired as a head coach because until he shows me he doesn't suck, he sucks in my eyes for being a head coach in the NBA. And he's never shown me that he's been a good head coach in the NBA. And I think the only reason why he got this job was because of his Dallas connections, as well as, like you said, the similarities with him and Luka Doncic in terms of their play style. But yeah, in terms of Jason Kidd as a head coach, I'm under on him.
Hopefully it works out. Again, we're not rooting against them.
Yeah.
We wish them the best. We hope things work out. But again, until we see it, we won't believe it. Moving on, are you up or under on the Indiana Pacers hiring Rick Carlisle as their new head coach with a 4-year, $29 million deal, which is kind of weird how they announced the amount of money he's making.
Listen, man. I've been critical of Rick Carlisle, especially recently, but I'm up on this hiring. They needed a new. They needed a new coach who brings some resume with him, who brings some stability with him. Especially given all of the events transpiring within the Pacers organization. So I think the hiring of Rick Carlisle as their new head coach was a really good, good thing for them. And I think hopefully he'll be able to unlock more of that DeMontis Sabonis and Miles Turner potential, as well as the Malcolm Brogdon potential that they have. But, I think some stability was needed in their organization. And I don't think it's a bad move hiring Rick Carlisle.
Yeah, he's a stabilizing presence. Like, the one thing you can say about Rick Carlisle is that this guy is an established voice. He's an established veteran coach, and he won't take any nonsense. Like, I don't think we're gonna hear any locker room issues like we heard with Nate Bjorkgren with Rick Carlisle. So hopefully it will work out. Obviously he does have a connection with the Pacers as well, being a former head coach and an assistant coach with the Indiana Pacers. So hopefully things work out for Rick Carlisle and the Pacers.
Yeah. Next up, are you up or under on the Celtics hiring Ime Udoka as their new head coach? This is also Brad Stevens' first hiring as a president.
Obviously, Ime Udoka has been obviously in the running for multiple head coaching jobs, multiple opportunities, and he was very highly touted as well for obviously coming from the Greg Popovich coaching tree. So obviously we really expected him to get a coaching job at some point in time. Obviously, I think Brad Stevens saw something in him because we thought he was going to go like the route with hiring an unknown college guy and bringing him into the NBA. Clearly, he didn't do that, but I think Brad Stevens is a smart guy, and and since he's a former coach, he recognizes who can coach and who can't. So I think he's pretty confident in hiring Ime Udoka as well.
Yeah.
Next up, are you up or under on the New Orleans Pelicans hiring former Phoenix Suns assistant coach Willie Green as their next head coach?
I'm up on it. Yo, this is weird because I swear Willie Green was just in like the NBA, but dude, he was like in the NBA. I think he retired like a while ago, so I'm losing my ears at this point. But listen, the Pelicans clearly needed somebody new. I don't know much about Willie Green in terms of a coach. Like, I liked him as a player.
Apparently, he was well liked by the Phoenix Suns in the locker room.
Yeah, he's a good locker room guy. But in terms of the X's and O's, which I think is the biggest factor for the New Orleans Pelicans moving forward because of the fact that, you have a bunch of talents on your team. You need to figure out a way to produce their talent into success and turn it into success.
I think what they also need is a young voice, a new voice, kind of a voice that's more in tune with today's style of play, which I think Stan Van Gundy, the former coach, just wasn't that. So I think this could work out theoretically for them as well. Wishing the best for the Pelicans, obviously, and Willie Green.
Yeah. Next up, are you up or under on the Washington Wizards hiring Wes Unseld Jr. to a 4-year deal?
I'm up on it. I mean, again, it's Wes Unseld. Obviously, again, I'm not too familiar with his coaching. He's been around in the NBA as an assistant for quite some time. And, at least it's not Scott Brooks, which I think is a big W for the Washington Wizards. Just getting a new voice in there, somebody who can bring a new perspective into things, new life into things. And I think Bradley Beal really does like Wes Unseld, so that definitely helps as well. So yeah, I definitely think this is a pretty decent hire for them. He was high on their list, obviously, going through the process.
Yeah, he was one of those guys who's worked with Nikola Jokic as well, and that Denver process. So that definitely did play a big role into it. Also, the fact that he is the son of, the late, great Wes Unseld, who was, a franchise icon for Washington, I think also definitely helped. But yeah, in terms of strictly him as a talent, obviously we don't know much, but, I've heard a lot of good things about him, so hopefully it works out.
Hopefully it does, yeah. Moving on, are you up or under on the Orlando Magic hiring Jamal Mosley, formerly an assistant with the Dallas Mavericks, as their next head coach?
Again, like I said, I'm up on it. We don't really know much about him in terms of his coaching abilities.
It was kind of the direction we expected Orlando to kind of go to get a newer head coach, younger guy, an assistant, kind of someone to help their young guys develop. Which Jamal Mosley has been part of Dallas's developmental group as well. So
especially coming from at least a stable bench. Right, in Dallas. I was about to say stable organization in Dallas, but that's not really the case. But, coming from a stable bench led by Rick Carlisle and, bringing that into a young team, I think will, hopefully pay off for the Orlando Magic.
Yep, so that was a bunch of coaching hours. Next up, are you up or under on the Toronto Raptors hiring Trevor Gleeson from the NBL as a new assistant coach?
I mean, I'm up on it. Why? Because it's Nick Nurse hiring him, right? So,
bro, Nick Nurse saw the picture of Trevor Gleeson squatting, and he already knew. He knew this guy had what it took.
Listen, man, Nick Nurse has shown that he's been, a
He
good
sees the
acquirer
squat
of
technique.
talent, and he already has his coaching tree, with obviously the Nate Bjorkgren hire did not work out well.
Shout out Jama Manalela, yo.
Jama Manalela, Chris Finch, got his job in Minnesota. Sergio Scariolo he went back to Italy or Spain. No, Italy, right? Yeah. So, Nick Nurse, I think, has a good eye for talent. And at the end of the day, the head coach is still Nick Nurse, right? So I trust whatever he does.
I mean, apparently, Trevor Gleeson's also
he has a great resume.
He has a great resume. I mean, NBL Coach of the Year. I think he's won it multiple times. He's won a championship or two in the NBL. So he's definitely, and the NBL is no joke league. It's not a light work league. It's a very competitive league. So this guy does have a resume, and I think bringing him over to the NBA level, Nick Nurse obviously knows something more than what we do. So we definitely have faith in what he'll be able to do.
Yeah, next up, are you up or under on Scott Perry getting a 2-year extension from the Knicks?
Surprisingly, I'm up on it. Believe it or not, the Knicks had a good year.
Really? You're up on it? Wow.
Listen, I'm not saying it's a good idea to keep Scott Perry around, but I know he's not the one running the show. I think it's Leon Rose. And the fact of the matter is the Knicks looked better than they have in previous seasons. They did something they haven't done in quite some time, which is actually build a team and actually, use the guys they have, not chase free agents and not kind of do all the crazy New York stuff that they normally do. Like, this was a pretty good year for the New York Knicks. That being said, it was one good year. Do I think the New York Knicks are going to be as good as they were this season? No, I do not. I think in a normal season with, teams, typical playoff teams, retooling, rebuilding, and getting back into the playoff mix, I think the Knicks are going to be like an 8th or 9th seed at best next season. That is my, spoiler alert type of prediction for next year for the New York Knicks. Just based on the fact that I think the East is going to get better. Teams that missed the playoffs this year, I don't think they're going to miss it next year. But yeah, Scott Perry getting extension, fine, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with you, honestly, because of the fact that with the way the Knicks franchise has performed for the last number of years, if they get this year happens for them, I think you got to be able to retain as much of this year's magic as you can moving forward. And if Scott Perry was part of that process, then you kind of at least got to retain him for a little bit more time and see what happens after that. So I don't really mind the move for the New York Knicks.
Plus, it's only 2 years.
Exactly. It's only a 2-year extension. So, we'll see what happens with the Knicks moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, and finally, are you up or under on Colin Sexton actually being very available in trade talks? Obviously, the Cleveland Cavaliers have the 3rd overall pick in a draft that has a couple of good guards. And Colin Sexton I think he's an impending restricted free agent this summer. Yeah. He wants to get paid, and deservedly so. Apparently, the New York Knicks are also reportedly very interested in acquiring Colin Sexton.
I'm up on it for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think the Cleveland Cavaliers have identified that Darius Garland is the point guard of their future. And it does make sense because
Sexton really isn't a point guard.
Exactly. Sexton is an undersized 2 guard. And, those type of players, unfortunately, are not best served as starting options who you're actually going to win with. That's number one. Number two, the fact that Colin Sexton wants to get paid, and the Cleveland Cavaliers need to pay Jarrett Allen, which is their top priority. And you can't pay both. So where does that leave Cleveland? Cleveland obviously has to try to ship Colin Sexton out.
Also, Cleveland's actually reportedly trying to move up in the draft as well, because I think they want Jalen Green. Because I think Jalen Green does the things that Colin Sexton does, but he's also a bigger player. So, and he'll be on a rookie deal for the next 4 years. So that definitely helps him financially as well. So it's not a bad idea for Cleveland to explore the market, see what they can get, at least recoup some assets for this player. And hopefully, let's see what happens. I mean, at least as a Raptor fan, I'm really hoping that, we get, Suggs or Green or at least one of these
I mean, if we're able to get Evan Mobley, oh, man.
I mean, honestly speaking, the Raptors have a lot of directions to go, but so does the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it really depends on what they do with their picks. So It's definitely going to be interesting. The NBA draft is actually going to be coming up very soon. So definitely we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, YouTube. Basically, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, check us out on social media, Twitter and Instagram at @UpAndUnderPodcast, Facebook.com/UpAndUnderPodcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news or our reaction to the NBA playoffs as they occur. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. And yeah, man, more off-season content will be on the way. Also, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we post blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have time to watch or listen to the full episode, you can definitely read about it on our website as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. And yeah, as I was saying, off-season content will be continuing. We're going to be getting into some interesting topics, actually, heading into this off-season. We're going to be doing some new things. So definitely stay tuned for that. But with that concludes this week's episode. Once again, congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks for winning the NBA championship. And
Congrats.
Congrats. And we'll see you guys all in the next episode. Take it easy.
Easy.